Hi everyone, welcome to Weegiecast. This is the first episode of season two. Aiden and I were going to record another episode. We did record another episode. It never made it to air. It was too long, basically. That was the TLDR. And it'll never make it to air because it was 2.5 hours long. But this evening we've got a bit of an interesting special case in the sense that it's an interesting technique that Dave and John, pointing to the wrong way, but have have come up with. Dave's going to share a screen in a minute and walk through some bits and pieces. Aiden and I are going to ask some leading questions to both John and Dave around the technique, what it does, what it looks like from a risk perspective, a red team perspective, a blue team perspective, a little bit of fun in between, and it's just something brand new that both of them have been working on. So I don't know if you guys want to give yourselves a 2-minute intro. I mean, everyone will have heard John's voice before. We've had an episode with him. We've not heard Dave's voice before, I don't think.
No, I don't think I haven't done a Weegiecast yet.
There's still time.
Go on then, John.
My name is John Carroll. I get bullied by Andy on a regular basis. I'm a security contractor, and that's it. I've worked with Dave in the past on paid for stuff, and we do stuff that's just fun. That's all you need to know, right?
Yeah, we don't need to know your life story. It's fine.
All right.
And Dave?
Yeah, so Dave Mound, Death Pirate Online. I have known Andy for the longest out of all of us, I think. And
Unfortunately.
No, done a lot of stuff with John. John always hits me up when he's got some crazy stuff that he wants to get out of his head, and uses me as a mechanism to put it into code and make it a realism. And that's exactly what happened here. So John found all this, but we've worked with some ex-Philly type stuff before in the past. We were on a job. They got asked for what tools we wanted in the environment, so we gave them a big list of tools. They were kind enough to put the tools in the environment, but they didn't license any of it for us. So we were both using Bert for doing some stuff. Needed to do an offline install, but couldn't get the offline activation code out, and then use TNS exfil to actually get the offline activation code off the environment to license our Bert so we could do some work. So yeah, we're quite used to being able to throw things out of environments any way that we can, and this was a nice little addition to that. So
just rolling in to fuck around and find out.
Exactly, yeah.
Pretty much straight up. So
it more boils down to we don't like being told what we can't do.
That's fair enough. And Aiden, everyone has heard Aiden's voice before.
Yeah, you all know who I am. Yeah. I've had no co-host.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, press ganged into the role as the only vaguely other Scottish person that Andy knows.
We'll AI Dave's voice into other Dave's voice into this somehow. But in the meantime, we do have Aiden and I's colleague.
You want it to stop? That's it, done.
Who's going to hate us for doing that? But it's not well. Anyway,
what did he just say then? Could you play it one more time for me, please?
You want it to stop? That's it, done.
What were you doing to Spencer for him to say that, Andrew?
We're actually talking about soundboards of all things. And he was explaining how the soundboard worked. So I soundboarded him. I didn't exhibit. Yo, dog, I heard you like soundboards. So we soundboarded you talking about soundboards so we could soundboard you. Anyway, without further ado, let's share a screen and do the demo.
Let's do some demos.
Yeah. We're also going to try and remain on the rails as much as possible for this episode. So we'll see how that goes.
Right. So what we're going to play is the clip that we released on socials a couple of weeks ago now, 2-3 weeks ago. Well, I'll talk you through it. So we've got on the left-hand side of the screen, the left 2/3 of the screen is our Windows test machine, and on the right is our Mythic C2 server. So on the Windows machine, we're going to clear out the DNS cache initially, just to show all fresh DNS lookups that come in. And then in the bottom half, we've got our Python that's just going to run a Mythic agent for us. And that Mythic agent is going to do its DNS call back to our server. So that's basically what happens. So first of all, we'll clear out that DNS cache, and then we'll fire up Internet Explorer just so you can see the DNS coming in to this DNS monitor. So it's just waiting now for any new lookups. You can see there, opening up Explorer, see all the crap that comes out of Explorer. We then fire up our C2. You can see there the callbacks going out to these well-known domains, and the DNS resolutions at the top for those same domains. And there's nothing else in there kind of hidden away from you. So that's kind of why we have that DNS monitor running. Everything's running for that Mythic agent, so virus protection's on everything. And then in our C2, we get our callback, and that is purely using those well-known, trusted domains. So that was the end of a long period of research between myself and John. John actually found the issue initially, as I said, and then we continued to jump into a rabbit hole. I will say a rabbit hole. It turned more into a rabbit warren. The more we dug into this, there was just holes all over the place, and the more we scratched it, the further it went. We started with the DNS exfil. I wasn't happy until we had two-way comms. We did manage to get two-way comms, hence the building of the agent, but it's not on all of the domains that we've noticed, but certainly on a few, and it still satisfied my itch that I wanted a C2 over infrastructure that didn't belong to me. So I didn't have to register any domains, didn't have to worry about kind of getting the reputation up for those domains or anything like that. It was just pure using domains that already existed. So that was the proof of concept that we wanted to get to. We got there. So this is the story of how we got to that point.
So maybe John, you could kind of give us an idea of what it was that you first kind of discovered. What led you into the finding.
Round of applause for Dave. That's excellent.
Yeah.
We'll get like a soundboard. Yay! Bunch of claps. Yeah.
Just Spence doing that, please.
Dave's got other
Wants to
things.
stop. That's it. Done.
Dave's got some other things that I don't know if he'll show, but they're really worth.
Yeah, we can look at those, but give us the story on how you got there.
So I was doing a build review for a client, and the build review was actually quite good. Apart from there was one area where you could direct systems proxy, but he didn't have elevated privileges, so you couldn't actually install certificates or anything like that. But I thought, well, I'll point it to burp, and I'll leave it running whilst I'm doing some other things. You never know, FAFO, right? And then there's a HTTP web request going to tile-service.weather.microsoft.com or something like that. The exact domain's in the blog post. And initially I thought, you cheeky bastards, it's 2023, it's not wrapped up in TLS. I like everybody between my computer and Microsoft can see, that information. And whilst it's only the weather, is there a utility there for analytical? Can you track somebody off it?
It's still location based as well, isn't it, with the weather app? So there's still quite a bit of offset leakage there.
So I thought, well, if they've not wrapped it up in TLS, then what else are they not doing? And I just blasted it with burp, as we all do sometimes. High five burp, and then it came back with host header poisoning, and I was like. If you've ever done bug bounties or you've done app tests and you see host header poisoning, you're like, at least just for a DNS ping back, you're like, ooh, don't hack me. It's not that important most of the time. I mean, maybe it plays a bigger part in, now that cloud infrastructure is more reliant on using that information or actioning that information. But generally speaking, you're not getting paid out on a bug bounty. You're not going to mark it as a medium in a pen test report unless you can get it to do something. Maybe if it's a full lookup for an SSRF or whatever. But DNS, not bothered. And I thought, well, actually, because of the work that me and Dave did, like we say DNS exfil, but what we actually did in the place where me and Dave were prior, which was what sort of gravitated me towards Dave, because we have a prior relationship with this type of stuff. We were actually hitting a firewall for a big place, an important place, a very handsome place, and we were hitting the firewall, and the firewall was going, you can't have the web page, but the DNS was looking up. So we were actually technically data bouncing at that point. We just didn't scale it. And so the idea is, in that sort of siloed instance, we were hitting the firewall, which wasn't hitting the domains which we wanted, but the firewall was going ahead and passing over that sort of that lookup on behalf of us. So that's how Dave got the burp licenses to register. And I was like, Dave, I think we can do this. Code for me, please. So Dave whipped up some PowerShell in about 10 or 15 minutes. And I was like, thank you. I'm so disabled. Like I'm terrible at programming. It's been so frustrating for me. And he just watches with his popcorn and is like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll give him 2 days of sweating and then I'll help. And then the principle was, you've got an opportunity to send a web request to a trusted or high-value, high-ranked domain, or a less likely to be blocked domain. And in this case, it was a Microsoft domain. So you're making a web request, and it can get a little bit confusing. Some people have read the blog post, and it is quite long. But the main principle is, it's not traditional DNS exfil, although when you're receiving the data, it does happen over DNS. It's purely 50% about hitting a domain that is not yours, and it's going to do something for you and send that DNS out. So that was why I wanted to call it data bouncing, and Dave wanted to call it fragments, and we had about 10 names initially, didn't we? And it's such a weird, hackers, we always get stuck on naming, we're going to call it this, and then getting into it. And anyway, so when you look at that from a siloed perspective of one to Microsoft, you go, oh yeah, that's cool. That's a nice little egress avenue. And if I really, really wanted to, I can use it. And the SOC probably won't see it because it might look like normal traffic of every whole endpoints connecting to weather.microsoft, blah, blah, blah. And arguably, if it's HTTP, maybe you send, anyway. So I'm sure Dave it, and then we were like, where else? And then it was like, right, well, as many domains as we possibly can. And we put a list of domains together. I think it was the Majestic Million, the first one. And then we hit the Sygenta 10 mil, maybe.
That's right, yeah. We picked up FC's 10 million from the FC did work for. Collating a newer Alexa top million, it was his thing. So we threw that through, and it just became apparent that it was rife across a lot of domains. Quite handy if you wanted to get out of somewhere, and they were using whitelisting because there's pretty high chance that at least one of those domains that's in that list is going to be allowed through in that whitelisting.
To Dev's, so we'd got this. What we did is we took a leaf out of Burp Collaborator's book where we basically padded a lot of headers into requests to this top million. So we got the top million. The way that we got it to tell us where the location was and what domain it came from was the you'll see it in the post, but it's position. So if it was a host header, the subdomain would be host.google. And then our external address. So when we received it, it would tell us what domain it came from, but also which part of the request is responsible for calling home. And then, so that's why there's this recruiter script that basically tells you all of your candidates out of the big list that you give it. These are the ones that will work. These are the ones that you can use to bounce. So we went through and did a lot of domain names. We had a little giggle at some of them there. I think the main thing that became apparent to me and Dave is that it's completely indiscriminate of industry because a lot of the places that will fundamentally, it's about getting something to do a host name lookup on a really primitive level. And me and Aidan were having a chat about some other things before we recorded this, where as long as you get it to do the host name lookup, you're going to get your data or your fragment of data. What we'd seen is that the cloud-based sort of CDN style people were probably the most. What was it, about 20% of all of our?
The biggest offenders were things like load balancers, CDNs, those types of infrastructure devices. But it wasn't limited to that, was it? Because we did another run of those domains and captured the server headers that were coming back in the responses. And there's everything in there from like Hikvision cameras, Microsoft IIS servers, Nginx, Apache, and then there's the big CDN providers, I'm going to say the name. They're your Akamai's and people like that, right? So, as you kind of expect nowadays as well, that they'd be probably up there in the high percentage dealing with that traffic anyway. We're talking about like the top domains, and they're one of the top CDN providers. So that's kind of what you'd expect to see. But yeah, it was. It's not limited to that by any stretch, because we were hoping it would be contained within a particular software or particular tech stack, and then we could just go directly to them and say, hey, look, you're doing something that's causing this leakage. But when we started looking at it, we were like, this is just all over the place. It's like it's not limited to a particular stack. It's not limited to a particular company. Is this now a protocol level issue? And if we go to the IEEE and say, hey, maybe we need something different for security around these types of DNS resolutions from different headers within the HTTP protocol. But that's kind of where we left it, wasn't it, John? Because it's just been we went through the responsible disclosure process with much to John's annoyance. I think John wanted to run with it, but I was holding the reins a bit, saying, no, let's at least get some answers and let some people know about this. But people come back and say it's not a problem, or that's just how the internet works. Is one of the responses? It's like, well, maybe it is, but it still needs sorting out, right? It's still an issue. So let's talk about this. But yeah,
just stab somebody and they go, yeah, that's how knives work.
Yeah.
A good example though, like it's very true. It's like you stab something like that's like you find cross-site scripting. Well, that's just how HTML works. Like it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's a nice point. I think that like me and Dave were like we were balls to the wall for the first 3 weeks, 100%, weren't we? We were so excited about it and what we'd found and the sort of research that we dipped into and like Dave's building cloud infrastructure like there's no tomorrow to support mass collection and renderings of TLDs and putting charts together and export capability.
Should we do a quick basic demo?
Yeah. I was gonna say like
segue
into a demo. We can dive into. Hopefully it's not fucked up. In the 5 minutes we've left it alone.
Yeah. All right. Hopefully you can see this. So what we've got here, basically, what I did was absolutely love AWS and the ability to do things at scale and at speed. And for this research, it was no different. So we registered a domain in Route 53 and then just basically ported those Route 53. For those who don't know, Route 53 is Amazon's DNS service. So we registered a domain with them, and then all of the logs for that service we put through to CloudWatch Logs, which is AWS's logging platform. And here I've just got a live tail of the logs for our domain that we were using for the research purpose. On the left, Insomnia, a bit like Postman if you've never used it, but we can use it just for making quick requests and messing around with headers and all that type of stuff. So we'll make a quick call to iTunes, apple.com, get an invalid URL back. It's fine, 400 bag requests. I'm not expecting to see anything here. If we then add our host in here for our DNS, and we're just appending this with, as John said, the host, because we're messing around with the host header, and then the domain that we're interested in. So this is how we identify which domains were reporting back to us. So if that's enabled and I send that, I still see this 400 bad request. Interestingly, the request code doesn't really matter to us because the lookup off the host header is still done. So you can get 400 requests, 500, it doesn't really matter. We would still expect to see at some point that request coming in. So here we go, and there we go. It's coming. It's pre-pended proxy host in there, but we've got our host.itunes.apple.com come through. So that is the basics of how this exfiltration is working. So I'll stop that there. But that's a quick, easy demo there with the power of AWS behind it, because it was so simple using it.
Sorry, Apple.
Yeah, apologies.
Just one of many domains.
One of many. Yeah.
Because those that maybe haven't read the blog post, like we're recording this the night before you guys are going to publish it, and the plan is to release this episode at the same time you guys release the blog post. So if people hear the episode first, they can go and click on the blog post. It'll actually be in the show notes. Like a running joke of Weegiecast was, it'll be in the show notes, and there's no show notes. This will be one of the few episodes that has show notes, and the show notes will have a link to this blog post and maybe a link to if Dave ever gets around to writing his blog posts.
I'll get there. I'll get there. Don't worry. I'll get there. The other thing that I could show you is obviously took this a stage further, and I like dashboards and metrics and all the rest of the stuff that goes with it. So we created some dashboards around this so that we could try and identify interesting domains, the unique counts and things like that from the domains that we were doing. And I'm able to quickly show that, I think.
I am sorry to cut in. I really liked how you sent it straight from Route 53 into the logs without actually. So I use a Interact listener to collect my stuff, but Dave actually sends it straight into. Is it CloudWatch?
CloudWatch, yeah. So straight from Route 53 into CloudWatch, and then added some metrics and dashboarded around that. So we've got all our results down the side for all the domains. So these are all domains that have been responding. And then we started breaking it up into stuff that was interesting to us. So like .gov.uk's and just .gov addresses, education addresses, total counts, and then the top subdomains that were coming through. So like the proxy host, and there's like auto discover, iKeynote. It's quite interesting. Tester home. Don't know what that is, but yeah. So we were just trying to get some more insights into the raw data that we were getting. This is the top resolvers. So these are the actual resolver IPs that have hit the DNS service looking for it. But it's difficult to say whether or not they are the ones doing the initial lookup, because they could be further down that DNS chain. But interestingly, most of the higher responders on here are CDNs and load balancers as well. So that's just some of the ways that we're doing the metrics around what we were finding.
So from
How cool is that?
It's pretty
Very
cool. From like a risk perspective, what risk does this pose to organizations?
Well, I mean, if you are concerned about
let me
going,
rephrase it. So you've talked about data bounce and you've talked about fragments, and they're kind of the same thing. You're talking about exfiltrating data. So is the risk here just data exfiltration, or have you got other risks associated? Like we talked about C2 at the start and how C2 works. Like how organizations watching this are like, shit, this is a problem. But what's the underlying risk here?
trust, I guess, because you're reliant on those initial domains as the point of trust for any data leaving that environment, or in some certain cases coming into the environment. But I think if you fix the first problem with stuff leaving, you inherently fix that second issue of stuff coming inbound as well. But yeah, it's a trust thing, right? Because if you see in your logs, you're normally looking for stuff going to domains that you don't know, or you're looking up domains against known badness and saying, we think this domain's bad. But when you see stuff going out to those well-known domains, there's a certain amount of trust there already, especially for things that you would expect to see leaving that environment. And because the list is so large, we can do things like look at your DNS cache initially to build up a list of the domains that we're going to use for the exfiltration. So we can really tie it down to being almost natural traffic within the environment that we're going to be doing the exfiltration from. I think that's where the danger is really. There's a lot for defenders to try and pick up on, to try and understand that traffic is actually malicious. And there's also the two sides of this as well, in that there's stuff going out and it's going to a domain that's supposedly trusted. So you might not pick that up in your logs at the network end of your target environment. But also it's hitting a load balancer or a CDN and then being farmed off from there. And then who's responding to that? It might not be even hitting the logs of the domain that you're actually using for the data bouncing. So they might not be aware that someone is using their name for this type of exfiltration. So both sides are reliant on whatever it is in the middle to be conscious and alerting on this type of exfiltration technique. So I think that's the that's the problem space that we've got here, is that both sides might be blind to the fact that this is actually going on.
That's better than I could have said it, Dave. I think the other component here is what implied controls are no longer on the table. So if to Dave's point about known bad addresses, if you've got like some wretched domain like .scot or something like that, and you've I had to, you don't actually get to block that. Because if Apple's resolving, or if, sorry, I don't mean to mention anybody specific, but if the trusted or high ranking,
well, we used Apple as the first example, so it's like we're not shitting on Apple as an example here. It's just
let's not kick them down the road though. Let's spread the love.
There are lots more exciting domains that are relating to cybersecurity and cybersecurity defense that we totally cannot mention, but I'm sure people will find out eventually, because this problem probably won't go away. But say, for example, you've blocked a domain, you've blocked the domain here, but Apple hasn't, or actually they still need to resolve that. So whilst you're not getting you're not moving up to a certificate where you're actually going to block it at the web layer, you're still going to get that DNS request, you're still going to get the data. So you don't have the capability to block this type of attack by using traditional, like if Acme Core says, all right, you know what, actually I know where Dave's C2 is, I'm going to block its IP address. Doesn't matter.
What about technologies like DNSSEC and stuff like that, though? Do they not come into play?
Well, because the DNS has already been done at the target network that you're on. As far as they're concerned, that DNS resolution is absolutely fine, because it is going to Microsoft. It's going along the route towards Microsoft or towards Apple or to whoever, and it's at a point in that infrastructure, once it's left that environment, that is doing that lookup. So, as far as your environment is concerned, everything's cool, right? You wanted to send something to, the Met Office. I did a resolution for the Met Office. I gave you the IP address, and you sent data up there. Everything's cool. It's what happens when it gets there and it starts unwrapping that HTTP packet and seeing, oh, but I've got a different host header here. Maybe I should do a look up there and see where that is. That's outside of that environment. It's already gone, already left. So it's difficult. It's difficult. Things like DNS whitelisting. We can still get around that if we know what's in that whitelist. Like I said, there's a high chance with some of the names that we've got in this in the domain list that it's going to be in there. So I was speaking to someone about this, and I mentioned it to them, and they came back and said, "You're an absolute twat, Dave, because we've just had 2 weeks of threat modeling. And we had DNS exfiltration as part of our threat modeling, but we kind of brushed it to the side because the amount of domains that we actually allow in the environment is quite small. But you've mentioned at least 3 of them in your POC." So it was like, okay. So yeah, everyone's back to the drawing board with DNS exfil, because it's
the other good bit here is that, not the good bit, the sucky bit here is that even on traditional DNS exfil, there's a lot of people that just carte blanche accept it because it's too expensive to keep that information, just on the off chance that, something bad might be happening somewhere. And I believe that there's some stuff that will pick up some types of detections, but this just pushes it even further back, doesn't it?
And there's the other side of this as well, in that if it is your domain that's being used for this type of exfiltration, and you put out, you go on MISP and you're like, yeah, we had C2 calling back to xyzdomain.com. It's the reputation of that XYZ domain that then gets, they're acting as like maliciously, so their domain reputation is going to take a hit. So maybe I wouldn't want my domain to be part of that list. Just
that's a good point of removing yourself so that you're not part of the problem. And one of the things I wanted to touch on, because I've forgotten it twice, and every time I was going to say something, you guys like, oh crap, I forgot what I was going to say. I remember it now. So the Majestic Million, or the sort of corpus that we worked with, these were all mostly top level domains, so like primary root domain .tld type thing. But when we decided to focus on some particular vendors, it just looks like they wrap up. If you see it on one of their domains, you're probably going to see it on many, if not all of their domains. So like if you've got defense software running in your environment that keeps an eye on what web traffic you might be visiting, and it might be scored or measured or allowed or denied, maybe a cloud firewall that does such a thing. I don't know. When we do your traditional DNS enumeration, we did the same thing. We got a lot. I think I personally used AMAS. Dave, did you use AMAS?
Yeah,
AMAS is cool. So enumerate all the domains and then put all of those domains through the recruiter file, and then you've got a very tailored list of domains. So if you're red and you're mapping out your target, and you start to identify on the outside some of the technologies that your target is using, you can be very specific. So if you wanted to use a defense provider, a product, and they're on the list, or you can find data bouncing candidates, it's the stuff that we've seen has been very, very high level. And this is why we've said a few times that it's like a kaleidoscope of turds, because it just keeps getting worse and worse. And like in every different direction that you look at this, you're like, I'm so sorry. And we're just talking about host headers at the moment. Like there are other areas. We haven't done any tooling. It's theoretical, but we know that it's sound because I've done very noddy versions of, right, collaborator says yes, okay, we're good, But it's going to be
something I'd like to ask you, if you want to dive into that a little bit, is obviously people will be able to look at in the article, but you've got a couple of additional kind of methods for soliciting the host name lookups. There's a video for one of them on the blog post, but yeah, if you want to dive into those a little bit.
Is that with my face like this? And so it goes to
stop. That's it, done.
It goes back to that principle of get something else to do a host name lookup for you, and then put your data in the host name. So some of the other things that will give you a host name lookup in modern web applications are so you guys, everybody knows the hacker's choice, right? THC. They put up Twitter up the other day, and they were going, I can't believe that Twitter is blocking my domains, which was pointing to a tool. So I was like, that's following the domain, and by following the domain, it's already done a lookup before it even gets to the resource, right? That can data bounce. So I was like, that's interesting. Let's have a look at Twitter, and that's even before you hit send. So it will read it from the DOM and then send it, which it obviously has to send to the server, but the commitment of pressing enter for me is where it should be sent, rather than maybe some XHTTP JavaScript.
But people want to see the preview before they hit send to make sure
exactly. Yeah. It might look like this. Cool. Hit send. Send. Yeah. So that moves you to Dave's point, is it's not just Twitter. There's anything that does a link preview or a URL or maybe even a URI preview. Anything that goes, I can fetch that. Let me go and get it. But before I get it, I need to know where it is to be got. Hostname lookup. So Slack, Discord, Teams.
Yeah.
There's whole subsets for other people. Not me and Dave. We want our lives back, don't we, Dave?
I do.
So like there's whole bunches of stuffs that will go and do these. The reason why we gravitated towards host headers mostly was because it was the first thing that we found. But as it turns out, where there are other examples, some of them might need more engineering to happen. So like if you're using any of the things that we just mentioned, you'll need a session and you'll need to control that, and you probably need to be programmatically sound. Not me, Dave. And so like there's a commitment there. So if you're a red teamer or you're a C2 aficionado. How do you say it?
Aficionado.
Aficionado. If you're a frequent fancier of C2 comms, then you might spend a bit of time to do R&D on stuff that absolutely will. Like we know that some frameworks are using Microsoft's infrastructure. Not naming anybody, Dom. And then so I think if we normalize this method, lots of other people could possibly use it in their C2. And we only want to use that to apply pressure so that the fix is there, Dave.
Yeah, that's right. And when you think about C2, it's the call back to your command and control server that's normally the heavyweight call. Typically, when you're making, you're tasking your agent, they're fairly small packets, but the responses from those those taskings are normally what's large. So if you can use, a data exfiltration method over a fairly well-known domain to kind of hide that data inside, you're covering your tracks fairly well with that, and that's that was evident with the Mythic agent that we built. So even though the call coming in wasn't over one of the well-known domains, it was still a domain not in our control, but it wasn't one of those big named ones. All of the bulk of that traffic is still going to go back via those super well-known domains. So you're going to lock in with that.
So how does it work from it? So we talked about kind of the red team perspective. You're talking about C2, you're talking about DNS exfil, but from like a blue team perspective, how do you fix it, or can you fix it? Is there a fix?
I think you can to a certain degree, but again, with the detections, there's going to come CPU cycles, and it's going to be intensive trying to look for it. And one of the things is looking for host headers that don't match your the domain that you're actually sending the traffic out to, and as John alluded to, it might not necessarily be the host header, it might be the referrer, it might be exforwarded for. So you've got 3 or possibly 4 or maybe more that we haven't found to check. But there are ways that you can find it, but is it worth the time and effort looking for it? I don't know. Is it really your problem to be looking for it, or is it the infrastructure's problem where that's going to, that's actually doing the lookup that maybe they shouldn't?
I suppose where do you farm it out to? Do you farm it out to is it down to your EDR vendor to pick this up? If you don't have an EDR vendor, is it down to your network team? Is it down to your SOC team? Is it down to your?
I mean, EDR is quite good at picking up beaconing anyway. So when you've got something that's calling out a typical beacon period, but with something like those Windows weather widget, it beacons out itself, right? It has all the characteristics of a beacon because that's what it does. It's looking for, has the weather changed? No. Has the weather changed? No. And it's doing that all the time, and that's basically all your C2's doing. Have I got a task in? No.
Has the weather changed?
so everything's like very similar. You could look at stuff calling out to domains that wouldn't be. So is Notepad making a call out to the weather domain? That's obviously going to be a bit weird, but as we've seen, some of the domains are quite well known, so you can target your injection into a process that would normally be calling out to that. So the example we gave, the iTunes.apple.com, if I was to inject into iTunes and then use iTunes as the kind of cave for where my C2 agent's running, as a blue teamer, if you see iTunes as a process calling out to iTunes, the domain, even though the EDR might be screaming, this is malicious because, it's done process hollowing or whatever to get in there. As a defender, you're just going to be like, well, that doesn't really look that bad because it's iTunes calling out to iTunes. I'm going to let that one go probably, and it'll be marked as a false positive. If there are any blue teamers listening that think that iTunes calling out to iTunes is malicious, or how you would kind of investigate that further, I'd be keen to know, because like I said, we spoke to quite a lot of people about this and how to detect it, and it just, every stone that we thought we were unturning, there was just 1,000 more beetles running out from underneath it. It's like, oh my god, let's put that stone back quick.
So what's the response been like? So you said you've spoken to, you went down the responsible exposure route. Like what have people given it?
People have been, we see the issue, but it's not ours. Like it's not down to us. Yeah, it's our domain, but it's not our infrastructure. Other people have gone, it's not really our problem.
It's how the internet works.
It's how the internet works. That was my favorite. It's how the internet works.
I think the thing that we found a bit astonishing was, and I think that was around the time where we were like, do you know what? Screw trying to inform people. They can figure this out themselves. Dave made sure that we reached out to a reasonable amount of people that we might care about in the West, and say, expect this. But some of the, like when we had a conversation with one, while we're on topic of EDR, we had a conversation with one EDR vendor. We had to go through HackerOne because that was the channel that you communicate with these people, and they were just like, yeah,
there was another one as well, wasn't there, through the crowd bug bounty platform, and the initial triage was basically, we don't care unless you can get a session. It was like, I don't think you understand the issue, mate.
Yeah. And I think that the main thing is that they're going, yeah, that's not actually touching our infrastructure. Like, it's using your domain. So like in this case, it was to a degree they're correct, because it's actually their content delivery network or their cloud WAF that's protecting them. So because they're taking the traffic, it's those people that told us that's how the internet works, that are saying, yeah, we're not bothered about that, go away. So when we reached out to some of their prominent clients, Microsoft being one of them, they were saying, well, it's not actually touching us. So we're like, you do understand that it's your domain that measures your trust on somebody's network. You know, like if you go, oh, this product's running, well, we don't know that domain, let's block it. Or this product's running, oh, we trust that domain, let that traffic out. You know, like, and they know this, but I think there's an element of, because their hands are tied, or they don't really know.
I think there's a lot of burying the head in the sand because they don't know what the answer is, and I think that a lot of people just don't want to get engaged with it because there'll be a level of responsibility to get something fixed within that organization. So
I think you're right. I think there is a level of the first to flinch on who's going to sort of take one on the chin to try and address this is going to be the one that everybody else looks at. And that leads me on nicely. So like on the blue team stuff, Andy, there's three things that are probably worth talking about. One of them is so the Ollie, who's now at NCSC. I think he's got some nice ideas of how to detect it. I think we had a chat with Darktrace, didn't we, Dave?
Yeah.
They're up for trying to do it, and they were the only people that would come forward and say, look, you know, we might be able to participate in preventing this. We might not be able to. We won't be the sole people that can prevent this. This needs collaborative effort. Especially
they saw it was a problem and they wanted to help fix it, which is more than a lot of the others have done. So
everybody else bounced, and then there was something that
no pun intended there at all. They bounced that data to fuck.
Boing. And then there was a chap who we all know, mentioned his name before we recorded. He was basically saying, I think I'm okay to say this. There's nothing sensitive here, but he just didn't say it to me directly. He said it to his boss. He was basically saying that you're imposing cost, but the wrong way. So, you know, you're supposed to impose cost on the other side of things, but the amount of possibly re-architecture and visibility and cost of storage that you would need to implement to get true visibility on the off chance that you're facilitating a data bounce or your data is leaving through data bounces is probably going to be significant because of how broad the playground is for, you know, like how many different ways we can perform a indirect hostname lookup, indirect exfil type thing.
So from like a deceptive engineering perspective, thinking from the blue team here for a second, if you were to fill like a DNS cache on an endpoint with dummy hosts that you guys have got on a list of some description, that would be a potential way to detect it if beacons are going out to those endpoints.
Yeah, if they were using that mechanism of dumping DNS cache locally to build out the list of the domains that they were going to use, but so what we actually do is use the list from that cache and match it against the list of known ones that actually work to actually build out that list. So no, that wouldn't work, unfortunately, but good idea. I like where you're thinking.
And that's why, like, even though you could probably blast it in a random direction with some domains and get pretty good hits, but we do need a level of
you could seed it with a domain that you know that you don't use, but it is on the list, and then that would obviously be your honey token, or even a subdomain of one of those domains that is allowed would be a good way to token it.
So I was going to dive in because obviously we're recording this before the blog post goes out. But what can people expect from the blog post that maybe haven't read the blog post? So obviously we've talked about different techniques. We talked about it from red perspective, blue perspective. But what are you guys releasing on top of the blog post? Is there tooling coming out, or are you just being like, here's the problem?
Yeah, so we're releasing some tooling which will aid organizations to see if their own domains are susceptible to data bouncing, so that they can then check whereabouts in their infrastructure is that happening and maybe try to address it. And then obviously the flip side of that is for the red teamers to have a way of utilizing this to exfiltrate data out of the environment. We won't be releasing the full C2. As I said, it's if you fix the exfil, you fix the infill. So it's just going to be the exfil side that we'll be releasing, but it's still beneficial to have that type of mechanism to get stuff out of an environment at scale with a trusted domain.
I think those when you read the blog post, you'll get the principle, and if you've got the principle and you've got the capability to create your own renditions of how to implement data bouncing yourselves, I'm kind of excited about that. I think it'll be interesting to see how community takes it and does its own variants, or like, maybe they don't use the horse headers, maybe they use the emails, Aidan, or maybe they use web signups or links or whatever. But I will have to give Nick Dunn a shout out. Nick, I think the code that's going to be referenced on the blog post will be from Nick's GitHub. So he's been putting some stuff together. Basically, I think he's pinched some of your Python, Dave, and made it work for me, because I think when we initially started, probably not the right place to show that first video, Dave. Dave wanted to call it FedEx because we were exfiltrating through federal domains. And
it's been responsibly disclosed, I might add. They are aware of it.
It has. But I don't think that they'll like watching it anyway.
No, but I found the irony of using highly trusted government organizations to exfiltrate data via was quite amusing.
It's on the nose, but sometimes you need that as well, don't you? Because it's like
we needed it to get traction into what we were doing, and for people to initially like sit up and be like, "Oh yeah, this is a problem." Because if you just send it with some other domains, they're just like, "Oh yeah, whatever." But when we sent that one out, it was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this looks interesting."
There was something that was quite fun. Dave Ashton from AWS, I'd messaged him because originally me and Dave were on this high, and then we were like, we need a fix for this. It's fun, and we're like giggity with the whole like having fun and sending it. Oh no, do these domains, giggle. But then like we were like, we need to be grown up a little bit here. This was Dave's thinking, not mine. And so I thought, let me reach out to people who I think are smart, and let me sort of get a measurement from them. And there was something that Dave said that was quite nice. He says, how do you rate this on a CVSS calculator? And I was like, oh, that's a good interview question. If this term data bouncing or this principle takes off and it becomes common as a thing, that would be a fun one to have a conversation about, because when you go through your your little calculator, you're going to struggle to give it any impact. But actually, it does remove quite a lot of web defense level boundaries, because it starts off as trusted good web, and then it sneaks off into, it changes gear from a TCP thing to a UDP thing. That's cool. And it's completely indirect as well. So, all of those things that we've discussed, like who's to blame for this, who's accountable for this, who wants to know about this, but the measuring of it in terms of like, what are we dealing with here? It's weird. And that, I think that's one of the main things that sort of kept us interested. There was something else that I wanted to say as well. It was around tooling. We've mentioned Nick. It's going to be on his GitHub blog post. Eventually, I'll probably put some screen records of the tool to be ran, but I'm hoping that other people will pull the tools apart and maybe even add more features like time delays or what else do I want? I'm not sure what. Just more interested to see what community does with it.
Yeah, also, I'm interested to see where else this research goes, because at the moment we've only looked at like the HTTP side of life in terms of content delivery networks, and as we know, CDNs are capable of quite a bit more than just rerouting web traffic. So even things like opening up WebSockets at the edge and things like that. So if you could get a WebSocket opened up over a domain that you don't own, that's obviously going to be highly valuable to red teamers and stuff like that. And
John's found his thought. His thought has popped into his head.
No, I remember, Dave, I don't know if I told you this. So it'll do HTTP2 and HTTP3, but that's irrelevant. And also you cannot put content in the front of this. So whilst we just go for the / you could actually still make requests for like common known web asset information, and we'll never need it. But from a log perspective, it look interesting. That's not what I wanted to say. Dave, my Lenovo, this one here, know why you two are smiling. My Lenovo laptop has a 5G SIM card in it, and my crap network at home, I fell off my wireless network, and it said, "Oh, please top up your 3 mobile because I don't have any credit." So I thought, I've got access to the network, and I can access 3's domain. Let me map out 3 and see if I can bounce through that, which I can. But then I thought, why did I just do 3? Why don't I do everything? And it turns out, 3. At least for 3, you can still push information out of a SIM card that's got no credit. And that's got some utility there, because if you're in an environment where an oppressive regime is stopping you from using your cellular network, or you just don't have any credit, or you don't want any credit because it's tied to it.
I like how we went from fucking oppressive regime to maybe you've just run out of phone credit, like
there's a very clear path there, Andy.
It's the same thing, right?
just somewhere in the middle.
There is only column A and there is only column B. There's nothing in between those two. But the point is, that's pretty interesting as well, because from a network perspective, are you off the network or are you blocked on the network, and can you move through the network using this method? So it'd be interesting for other people that are on different networks that hopefully don't have any credit and aren't under the governance of an oppressive regime. Maybe you guys can test it and faffle a little bit and say, right, well, on this network, it does the same thing. Because I think one of Ollie Whitehouse's point is get it out there. Probably didn't say it like that, but he said the sooner, when you're releasing it, the sooner that people know about it, the sooner that people can either address it or be aware of it. And, I think the main thing is, if the only thing that you get from this is visibility that it exists and then the option to get some visibility over it or make decisions, maybe some smart ass will come along and go, this is how you detect this. And the other side of it is, maybe EDR gets way better so that Dave can't put his Python on there. I don't know. So anyway, I wanted to tell you that bit about the credit. I don't know if I did tell you about it already, but I wanted to mention it because we're probably running out of time.
We're good. I mean, so the one thing I was going to ask is if people get hold of your blog and get hold of the code, have a look at it, and want to work on it a bit, are you guys open to them reaching out to you, getting in touch, and kind of
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
If it's anything related to any type of programming apart from me saying echo host name or something, then I'm just going to be like, yeah, cool. I'm going to put you on to Dave or Nick. Yeah. I think,
or Andy or Aiden.
Or Andy. I think the main thing is people faffling and features.
What does FAFO stand for, John?
Feck around, find out. Feck it. I think.
Stop. That's it. Done.
I think it'd be interesting to see what features people ask for. Like, can you imagine if it was possible to bang stuff from standard out into this that dynamically broke it down into bytes of 63 and just shoveled it? Like, that could become a really impressive little bit of kit for your pen test rig or your red team or whatever. It'd be that's beyond me. I can barely script, and that's even with ChatGPT helping me. Like, look at Dave smiling. I can see you on the little small screen, Dave. So I'm dead grateful for the help that if I know if it wasn't for Dave, I'd have just gone, oh, this is interesting. Shoot a little blog post, not very scalable, just like something else that's on my website that I'll go when somebody else does this in a year or two, like, I did. I'm like, shut up, I did it cooler. So working with Dave, always a pleasure, but his ability to spin things up and build things out almost immediately is fucking impressive. And Nick, like, super grateful for Nick as well to get me my client server working with. A few guys use Discovery Projects Interact, I'll probably need to mention that as well. But you'll need your Interact server to collect when you're doing like the poor man's version if you don't have a cloud setup. But the main thing is just to get people talking about it and see what they do with it. Me and Dave we've been balls to the walls for weeks on this, and now we're just like, right, go away now, you guys deal with it. And I think we'd have probably released it sooner hadn't we been nice to people about how long we would give them. Even giving them this time, I genuinely don't think that anything's happened.
It's been good to gauge like that initial reaction and then the initial responses that we were getting there, because it's put us in a position now that we're like, okay, they don't seem bothered themselves. Let's put it out there. Let's get at least everyone knowing about it and talking about it and see what comes of it. Because if it isn't an issue, as they say it is, then no harm, no foul, right? But we think it is, and we think more people need to know about it, get visibility of it, and let's do something about it. If it means rewriting the HTTP protocol, then
Well, I mean,
that's what you're aiming for, isn't it, Dave? You're looking for trouble, aren't you?
Well, so ultimately, I mean, we want to wrap this up a little bit, but we talked about this earlier on, not in the podcast, but like a couple of weeks ago, that this might be the death of HTTP 1 because HTTP 2 and 3 may.
They don't solve it.
Well, shit.
yeah. But can I also point out,
of course,
that this isn't a DNS issue? If someone tells you on LinkedIn that this is part of a DNS issue and DNS is at fault, do not listen to them.
They're a fucking liar.
They're a liar.
They're a charlatan cunt.
A LinkedIn charlatan. Yeah.
There was a moment. There was a moment where me and Dave would we didn't have pipes, but let's pretend that we're both sat there just having a deep like that kind of stare from somebody that's seen war. We're both like, was Jenkins right? We had like a millisecond of like, maybe. No, it can't be. And then it was like double down on like, if you visualize the journey of what's happening, you know that it's not a DNS issue.
And here's why: it's because it's part of the HTTP protocol that's actually causing that DNS lookup to happen. It's nothing to do with DNS. There's no DNS servers that are at fault. So let's just put that one to bed before someone decides to put some PNGs out with red boxes around them and call it a big issue.
Fuck it, they'll do it anyway.
They will do it anyway.
On that note, gentlemen, have we got any closing thoughts?
If anyone wants a burp collaborator working through Route 53 and think that is a good idea, let me know, and I'll probably build it. At the moment, I've put it to the back of my things to do because time and effort and all that. But if there's a cry for it in the community, or if anyone else wants to build it, more than happy to help them along that path. So,
John?
I think my closing thoughts are
not the TCP/3 here handshake.
What is that on Dave's shoulder? What?
Chocolate.
What? Okay. If you say it's chocolate, it's fine. That's cool. Cool.
So we'll
in typical Weegiecast style.
Yeah, we'll make sure to plug both your Twitters and obviously the blog posts and stuff in the show description. Probably call it for Nick as well, and anything else that you guys want to include for sharing out on this particular story.
We say congratulations to John for winning the Halloween costume event tonight for the best cosplay of Harold Shipman.
Dave, on that note.
On that note, indeed, I've been Andy.
I've been Aiden. Thanks, everybody.
And you've been listening to Weegiecast. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
People.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.